Hi, this is Sophia, and this is
Carol.
and I am going to be interviewing her on her educational experiences growing up in Switzerland and how her life evolved.
Thank you. So, as Sophia said, my name is Carol, and I grew up in Switzerland. My mother was American, and my father was Swiss. I was born in the French part of Switzerland, and I then moved to the Swiss German part with my family when I was a half a year old. And of course, I don't remember any of the French we spoke at that point, but I grew up speaking Swiss German and English for all of my childhood. So you can, of course, notice an accent, and that is because I learned English from my father as well as my mother, and my father spoke English with a Swiss accent.
So, your father was born in Switzerland and your mother was born in the United States of America.
That is very correct. So my father was Swiss, and he had come over here to Boston and was doing a fellowship, a postdoctoral fellowship in chemistry in the Harvard University laboratory. And my mother had a master's degree in chemistry, and she was working there. So they ended up falling in love. They spent a little bit of time moving from one place to the other here to different jobs, and then my father had a job back in Switzerland, and so they moved there, which is where my brother and I were born. So when we moved to the Swiss German part of Switzerland, we moved to a lake, which is the Lake of Zurich, and I was raised in a little village named Menedorf, and that little village was very close to, it was basically close to the lake and in walking distance, so I could always take walks with my mother to the lake, and my father actually had a sailboat, so we often went sailing. So I have memories of my mother, my father, my brother and myself often on the weekends going sailing, and we took our little dog Scamp along, and those were actually kind of happy times. So you might wonder about my parents, and my dad was quite high strung because he was working in forensic chemistry, and that's a very responsible job that he had because he was responsible for a lot of crimes that he had to find out who was the person who was innocent and who might have been the victim or who was the perpetrator. And since he was very, very good at his work, he got sent to him some international and national cases which had been already not solved correctly in other labs, and then they were sent to him. So he ended up being quite a high profile forensics chemist in Switzerland, and if you would look for his name, you would find that he was responsible for some high profile cases that were solved. So as a result, he worked many long hours, and during the week I hardly saw him. When I got up, he was already on the train to work, and when I was in bed, he came home, usually after I was already in bed. But he never failed to come into my room, and he would sit down, and he would usually tap his fingers on the bed because he loved piano playing, and then he would tell me some stories. And the stories he told me were always about character skills, which he had developed during his childhood. And some of those stories are very important to me, and I still remember them.
I'm sure we would love to hear some of those stories.
So, well, one of the stories is that he was sent to a children's home when he was quite young because he had tuberculosis. And in that children's home, he was the youngest of all of the children there. And they were not always very nice to him, and nobody wanted to play with him. But he was always watching them play chess. And he would sit there and watch and learn and watch. And one day, someone asked him to play, and he played with this child who was much older than him, and my father won. And at that time, he finally was able to become one of the group, and he was able to play chess with these people. So that's one of the stories he shared.
That's an amazing story.
Yes, and my mother, while my father was very hands-off, he kind of left parenting up to my mother. My mother loved having a good time. She loved sledding, she loved reading books, she loved taking walks, and anything which a child would enjoy doing, she enjoyed doing as well. So we would take long walks, we would often go sledding, and she always read storybooks at that time, like old storybooks that she had